And now I'm going to shut off my mic. So my name is, and then just say something about you.
I'm Frida Baranek. I'm an artist. I do sculptures, installations, and works on paper. I was born in Brazil. I've been living abroad outside Brazil since 1992. And in fact, I lived in many places in the world where I worked, I showed, and nowadays I live in Miami since 2016. And I have also a studio in Rio de Janeiro where I was born. Brazil is a very important place for me. It's a point of reference. Since I lived there until I was like 30 years old, it has had the biggest impact in my life. Growing up in Brazil, it was very interesting because I was confronted with different realities. Brazil is a country that has a lot of wealth, but a lot of poor people, misery, and it's just a very vibrant place, but very complex.
So in some ways, you've led my dream life. When I was getting out of college, I had a job in The Hague, and I lived in Holland for a while. I lived on a retired ocean liner in Rotterdam, and it was one of the best years of my life. And I decided that I wanted to be an expatriate and live all over the world, which you did. So one question for you: how many? I'm going to ask a couple of questions together, and so you can respond to them in one group. So, how many languages do you speak? And what were some of the other countries you lived in? And when you say you moved to Miami in 2016, it's like you came here for the worst 4 years of my life in, politically speaking, in the United States. This is like the most stressful time I've ever experienced in the United States.
Well, first I think I should talk a little bit about my background. My parents are European. Basically, my mother, she's Polish. She's a Holocaust survivor. She came to Brazil when she was 17 because my grandfather, her father, had come to Brazil before the war, and they were separated. And from this, her whole family, she and her brother were really the only survivors apart from one cousin. My father's side is also Polish, but my father's parents, they came to Brazil in the early 30s. So I'm saying that because having this European background made my parents, from when we were growing up, take us to Europe for holidays, and they wanted to show us different places. So that was quite amazing because, I went to many different countries in Europe. I went to every time to many museums. I was exposed to art, to theater, music. I studied music. I studied also in Brazil. I studied English and French growing up. So, I had this really kind of upbringing that it was a natural movement for me to later on in life wanted to live abroad for a while. So the first time I went abroad to live was after I finished architecture school in 83. I decided I wanted to live abroad for a while, so I applied to do a master degree in sculpture, because by that time um, I was already making art, and I got in at Parsons School. So I went to New York in 84 to live there. Um, and it was a very interesting moment in New York too, you know, in the 80s. It was super vibrant and a lot of things happening. But after having done 5 years of architecture school in Brazil, I I was just interested while in New York of being in the museums. And it was actually the first time I went to the United States, because prior to that, I only went to Europe. So, you know, it was the first time I saw a Rothko, a Pollock, you know, and all those works and, you know, people that I had never seen in Brazil, I had never seen in Europe. So I went to museums all the time. I was convincing my teachers at school that the best for me was to go to museums. Because I was quite tired of being in the school. Then I realized after that year that what I really wanted to do was just to work, you know. And so I quit after the first year. Plus, it was quite expensive to be in New York, and I was feeling this pressure from my family that, you know, it was hard, and I really didn't want to spend my time, for example, washing dishes or doing things like this, because I thought, hey, if I go back to Brazil, I will be able to work as an artist and work as a professional. I can use architecture and things like that. I don't need to wash dishes, you know. I should use my time to develop my work. I was really young. I was 22 years old, 23, you know. So that's what I did. I went back to Brazil, and I got a studio in Rio, and I had my first solo show in a gallery, which was a really great gallery in Rio, in 1985. So that was, to me, although I had shown before that in many group shows and important group shows in Rio and elsewhere in Brazil, that was for me the, you know, my first solo show. And then from then on, you know, um, I did a lot. I moved in 87. I decided that Rio was kind of slow, and I moved to Sao Paulo in 1987, and I lived there until 1992. At that moment, I was invited in 89 to be part of the Sao Paulo Bienal. And I did this really big installation, which was quite impressive. From that moment on, I was invited to many international shows, the Venice Bienal, to the Aperto in 1990, and a lot of, you know, different shows in Germany, in Italy, in France, and you know, culminating a bit in New York for the 20th century Latin American artists at the MoMA in '93, where I came and I did a special installation commissioned by the museum. In between, I got prizes. I was traveling. It was really great. I mean, I was traveling all over the world, working, making installations in situ, you know, and having this really, really great experience, you know, being quite young, you know, in all that. It was before, you know, it was until 90 to 93 that um, when I was, you know, living in Paris, that I met my ex-husband um, who is a journalist. And so I, you know, until that moment, I was planning to go back to Brazil, you know, and I had quite a following in Brazil. I had my studio, everything. But then I fell in love and I stayed. And the rest is history, because we moved, you know, quite a lot. I think um, I am a very curious and adventurous person. So it really, you know, it was the perfect life for me. We lived in Paris. I have two children. They were born in Paris. Then we moved to Berlin. We lived there 3 years. Then we moved to New York, where I live. We lived 9 years. Then we moved to London, where we lived 5 years. And it was in 2014, we actually divorced, and everybody moved back to the States in 2015. And I was in New York in 2015, and I felt that my life had changed so much from, you know, 10 years ago. And I just felt I wanted to have a different lifestyle. I wanted to go to a place that was a little low key, and um, I was missing living near the ocean, you know, with more vegetation around me. And so the idea to come to Miami came up. During all those, you know, different moves, as an artist, it's obvious that you can work everywhere, anywhere, at any time. But when you move, you have to start over. You have to create a new studio, a new network. At that time, when I did it, there was no internet. You know, it was started only in the late 90s, really, and to be so accessible. So, you know, it wasn't that easy. It took always at least 6 months for me to get organized again with the studio, with things going and all that. Obviously, I was moving with a family, so it was always my priority to get that family organized before I got organized. So, you know, on the one hand, it was fantastic, and I learned so much. You know, I met so many people. I was exposed to so many different things, you know, and I was showing and I was working and all that. On the other hand, I had to start over again many times, many times. And so that's why I came to Miami, you know, because it felt like geographically made sense to be closer to Brazil, where I keep a studio. I have, you know, my parents and my brothers, and the gallery who represents me since 89, you know, it's my main gallery in Sao Paulo. And Miami is in a way very similar to Brazil, because it has this, it's tropical, it's lush, it has the sea, it's sunny, and I think that because it's a little hub for Latin America, um, makes me feel more at home. It has a context for my work because, during those first years in Europe, doing what I do, I felt that nobody understood what is she doing, why is she doing this? There was no context whatsoever for me. Being here, um, people understand where I come from, why I do what I do, why is this way? You understand?
Yeah, I'm gonna stop the recording and start a new one.